Hey folks, I'm back again with another batch of new indie horrors I've recently seen and felt like sharing with the rest of you. I just want to remind folks that I'm working on finishing up my October countdown, where I count down the best of the best in horror since last October. It starts October 1st, but in the meantime, here's some good stuff in this week's Low Budget Binge. So let's start binging. Low Budget Binge is where we venture down the path less traveled and look at low budget, no budget, and sometimes international films that never get that top billing you see with the usual Hollywood fare. I'll indicate in the review down below where you can find these films along with their trailers. Here we go. Feral Female is new on-demand VHS and DVD from Frolic Films. It's directed and written by Jared Masters. An eccentric hunter, played by writer-director Jared Masters, is called in to track down and capture a feral female, played by Kate Lee Johnston, who is traipsing topless across the LA hills and murdering random people. Having covered indie films for the last, 15 years now? I've covered almost all of Jared Masters and Frolic Films releases, so I know what to expect from them. Over-the-top acting, low-key effects, a slight horror concept, campy humor, and maybe a drag queen or two. Masters basically has taken the blueprint of John Waters' earlier films and crossed them with some of the more surreal, art scene portraits of LA, reminiscent of Andy Warhol's experimentals, and maybe toss in a little Greg Araki feels for good measure. The result is always something interesting, but never mainstream. So if you're looking for a polished movie for the masses, Feral Female ain't it. But Feral Female is a gaudy and violent little number that gives you exactly what the title promises. There's barely a story going on here. Masters instead simply shows the feral female attacking one lone person or a pair of people over and over again until the credits roll. Masters does appear in front of the camera here, which is something I haven't noticed in previous works, and gives a goofy and over-the-top performance trying to imitate the late great Steve Irwin. He's introduced late in the movie to bring some kind of challenge for the feral female in the final act. It ain't Shakespeare, hell, it ain't even Troma, but it is a topless hottie trouncing around and acting like a puma for an hour and a half in the desert. If anything, I'm glad there are DIY directors out there like Jared Masters, proving that he continues to carry that indie torch, which is a crucial part of the horror genre. MAULER has just popped up on Tubi from One Tree Entertainment. It's directed and written by Terence Hines. A fame and fortune-hungry group of kids hatch a harebrained plan to win a dark web contest by breaking into a murder house where 10 years prior, a couple were killed and their child was kidnapped. In actuality, the child killed his bickering parents with a sledgehammer, and his creepy grandmother abducted him and taught him to be a religious zealot with a strict moral code. Though the kids believe the house to be empty, they don't know that the 7-foot-tall sledgehammer killer, known as the MAULER, is inside. MAULER is the perfect case of interesting killer, typical story. The film starts out like many 80s slashers, with some childhood trauma, which ends up being the killer's origin. Skip ahead 10 years, and the story actually begins, and it couldn't be more ham-fisted. First of all, the cast of characters are flat at best, extremely annoying to be completely honest. MAULER is guilty of one of the most annoying tropes in horror, that these kids bicker back and forth pretty much the entire time they are introduced, making the viewer wonder why any of them hang out together. The conflicts are forced, simply happening to fill space and runtime between kills. On top of the cliched soon-to-be victims, their plan goes from reckless to absolutely inane. When these kids find out someone is inside, they come up with the stupid plan to break in, tie them up, and then steal any valuables in the house and cash it in for profit. What begins as a fun way to get hits on the internet quickly turns into major crimes, and while some of the kids do show some reluctance, soon enough they all go total criminal and go through with the plan. But when one of them is snatched by the MAULER, the rest have to find their way inside to rescue their friend. I get it. The goal of the movie is to get the kids inside the creepy house and trapped in there with the MAULER. But the way it happens seems like it was cobbled together in the writing room in about the same time it takes for a quick morning shit. Not only that, but the film is poorly paced, The first time we see these kids, they're pulling up in the MAULER's driveway, and then they argue for around 20 minutes. It's as if none of them spoke to each other during the drive there. 2 of them try to break in, but that goes pear-shaped, so they come back to the car that is just sitting in the killer's driveway to argue with each other for about another 10 minutes. The next instance of inanity is when they get in, they just happen to find the MAULER's journals, and the kids just happen to find the page which explains everything about him and his motivations. I know this is another way to cut time and catch the kids up with the plot, but it really isn't necessary for them to know all of this info, especially when they don't use any of this knowledge against the MAULER later. So instead, it just serves as a way to catch the viewer up who slept through the first half of the film, or those with a short attention span that needs reminding. What irks me is that the MAULER, played by Breck Cuddy, is pretty cool. Director Terence Hines keeps his face in shadow most of the time, in silhouette or backlit by ominous lighting, paired with his tall stature of 7 feet tall, and give him a sledgehammer, and this is one ominous-looking killer. I also liked Cuddy's monotone voice spouting religious gospel. The scenes with the MAULER himself are actually pretty darn good. I love 80s slashers, and had MAULER leaned a bit more into that retro feel, kind of like an updated version of the surreal yet haunting lo-fi slasher Sledgehammer, maybe this movie would have worked. Instead, they filled the film with modern pop references and social media addicted kids with no sense of morality. This is a case of a bad movie surrounding a potentially cool killer. The cliched story elements, the annoying cast, their inane motivation, and the whole dumb reason they're thrown into this predicament is what bogs MAULER down, down, down. Brute 1976 will be available on demand on September 30th from Cinephobia Releasing and Raven Banner. It's directed by Marcel Walz and written by Joe Knetter. It's 1976 and a van full of hip models, a photographer, and some assistants are trying to get some cool shots in the middle of the desert. But as the group approaches a ghost town named Savage, they find a twisted family of masked maniacs ready to take them apart with chainsaws and a tool shed full of other weapons. The director behind Blood Feast, Pretty Boy, and That's a Wrap, Marcel Walz, and the writer behind George A. Romero's Twilight of the Dead team up and deliver a gory tribute to desert grindhouse terrors like The Hills Have Eyes and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Brute 1976 is heavily influenced by those 2 films, and it shows in every sun-bleached moment. This is a violent, exciting, and surprisingly funny little movie that wallows around in the gore and goo like a pig in slop. The film knows what it is and is proud of it, an uncomfortable low hug to those perverse, twisted films that you watched as a kid when your parents weren't looking. While things seem to be played very tongue-in-cheek, there is a serious tone to Brute 1976. The threat is real and in your face. Walz pulls no punches with some of these kills and manages to put a creative twist on some textbook slasher moves we all know and love. The outhouse scene especially made me scream out loud. I just wince thinking about it. Brute 1976 is also a good-looking movie. Walz uses dank caves, dusty roads, and decrepit shells of houses to make every corner feel dangerous. At times, there's a nice, strong House of a Thousand Corpses vibe going on in Brute 1976. There's a great scene where Walz flips between the photo shoot of 2 gals in bikinis and then to a girl being tortured in a chair by masked lunatics, all set to an ancient version of America the Beautiful playing on a record player. It's unsettling and funny all at once and kind of encapsulates the entire tone of the film, as it doesn't take itself too seriously, but still, it's there to unnerve you. Brute 1976 ends up feeling like a mix between John Waters and Rob Zombie, setting ultraviolence to a very dark sense of humor and lots of perversion and depravity. A lot of these soon-to-be victims are fleshed out quite nicely. I especially liked the cliched but still fun will they won't they relationship between Roxy, played by Adrienne McLean, and Adam, played by Ben Kaplan. Sarah French, who also starred in quite a few of Waltz's films, is awesome as Sunshine, and Gigi Gustin is put through the ringer and back again as Raquel. It's too bad more of the man monsters don't get equal character development. Most of them just wear masks and for most of the part are just silent brute killers. I understand that the name of the movie is Brute, but I still feel a little distinction between these guys would have made things more interesting. Among the killers, though, there is a standout. The strange and deranged Daisy, played by Jed Rowan, steals the show early on with his bald head, makeup, and apron made of woman's breasts. I wish there were more perverse characters like this one on this movie, but the rest of the group are pretty one note. Yeah, this is basically another Texas Chainsaw Massacre style flick. Yes, it's a horror cliche to have a family of inbred monsters chasing around pretty people in the desert, but Walz and Knetter clearly have a love for the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre and its ilk, and this twisted love really shines through with Brute 1976. If you're a fan of grindhouse grime and nasty perversion as much as I am, Brute 1976 is going to be your kind of wrong. Somnium is new on-demand and digital download from Yellow Veil Pictures. It's directed and written by Rachel Kane. Gemma, played by Chloe Levine, is a small-town girl who travels to the big city hoping to make it as an actress in Hollywood. The struggle is real, though, and soon Gemma is desperate for any kind of work. Seeing an ad at a sleep clinic called Somnium, Gemma applies to the night gig, watching over sleep study patients undergoing a treatment called Somnium. It's basically a glorified babysitting job, but instead of kids, these are just sleeping clients undergoing this new experimental treatment. But something seems morally off at the clinic as people are snuck through the doors of Somnium in the middle of the night and having the process done to them seemingly against their will. The deeper Gemma investigates, the more she realizes things are not on the up and up here. And soon Gemma begins experiencing night terrors of her own as the tension to get a job as an actress escalates. Reminiscent of such recent fame-seeking horrors as The Substance or Starry Eyes, Somnium focuses on a central character who more than anything wants to achieve shallow goals. For me, it was always difficult to relate to these types of central characters, but much like Demi Moore in The Substance and Alex Esso in Starry Eyes, Somnium works because it has a central figure that is both likable and worth investing in. Chloe Levine caught my eye in the low-key vampire flick The Transfiguration. She looks like a young Charlize Theron to me and has a likability that is undeniable. While she was miscast in last year's The Sacrifice Game as an older teacher looking out for her college students in peril, Levine really shines in this role as Gemma, a lovable central figure who is definitely flawed but relatable nevertheless. Much of what works in Somnium is because of Levine's sensitive and skillful portrayal of a young soul seeking her dreams. While a lot of the scares are something we have seen before in other sleep horror flicks like Come True, Mara, the Nightmare documentary, and even It Follows that basically feels like a rejected A Nightmare on Elm Street pitch, Somnium does deliver some solid scares with a bony and creepy sleep demon stalking Gemma in her waking and sleeping moments. The nightmare imagery works well in this subtle story that blurs the lines between dream and reality. These scenes are downplayed as the film chooses to focus on what drove Gemma to leave her home rather than the horrors of fame and fortune. These heavy feelings of guilt for leaving her hometown and friends and family is relatable and gives the film some kind of distinction from the usual star-seeker horrors out there. Still, these moments do get a bit heavy-handed the more they pop up in the narrative. Somnium is a strong story with a wonderfully talented lead in Chloe Levine. Those are the details that raise this film above the rest of the sleep horror films out there. It also has a very creepy performance by Jonathan Shake, who I didn't even recognize until the final credits. All in all, this is a creepy little number that doesn't really add anything new to the sleep horror genre, but still turns out to be entertaining nevertheless. The Jester and The Jester 2. One was released in 2023 and can be seen streaming on Tubi. Jester 2 will be in select theaters this weekend from Dread and Fathom Entertainment. They're directed by Colin Krawchuk and written by Colin Krawchuk and Michael Sheffield. In The Jester, a clown-masked killer stalks and kills a group of people using some form of magic as his modus operandi. That pretty much sums up The Jester, which, much like the Terrifier series that this series so much wants to be like, is really lacking in the story department. While The Jester was much less graphically violent, the factor that truly separated the Terrifier series from the rest of the slasher films released today, there was some kind of charm in the way the Jester presented himself as a showman, utilizing common magic tricks as ways to off people. But unfortunately, the Jester, the first one, turned out to be a toothless Terrifier ripoff. But what I love to see from one movie project to the next from a creator, and in this case, that creator is Colin Krawchuk and his co-writer Michael Sheffield, is growth. Over the years, I've seen young filmmakers blossom and grow from lo-fi indie offerings to big budgeters. Filmmakers like the Radio Silence guys, Adam Wingard and Mike Flanagan, came from meager roots, and now are major names in the industry. So seeing the improvement Krawchuk and Sheffield have added to the Jester 2 really shows promise. In the Jester 2, we once again have the mute man in a jester's mask go around and killing random people on Halloween night. The difference is that the story has been expanded by adding a real main character, Max, played by plucky newcomer Caitlin Trentham, who adds a lot of emotional depth to the role and actually quite a talented actress in her own right. But not only that, there are stakes set and a goal for the Jester to accomplish. After making a deal with the devil to perform the most amazing trick ever, the Jester is now cursed to roam the earth on Halloween night and must perform tricks on 4 people before a magic candle burns out. Now, it was never clear what the Jester got out of performing these tricks, other than the seemingly bloodthirsty satisfaction of killing, which the Jester gleefully expresses after each death. Also, there's really no details as to what happens to the Jester if he doesn't accomplish this goal. But still, I appreciate all of this added meat to the story. Trentham is definitely a true find as Max. She's young, beautiful, and a really great actress. There's not a lot of emotional bending required here, but what drama Max does go through is conveyed well by the young actress. The rest of the cast is just fodder for the Jester to tear through, but having this one solid actress in the lead makes all the difference. Michael Sheffield played the Jester in the first film and does so again in the sequel. He's tall and imposing, especially next to the diminutive Max. Much like Art the Clown, Sheffield highlights the performance aspect of the Jester, aping to the viewer and performing his own twisted comedy tricks over and over again. While things never get as goppy as Art's murder sprees do, there was a lot of thought put into each murder, pairing it with a well-known magic trick. I especially liked the never-ending links of knotted handkerchiefs bit. It really is the highlight of the film, seeing the Jester's cartoonish antics on display. One thing I do have to criticize is that the Jester mask in the first film is actually much more effective than this new mask the Jester sports in the sequel. The second mask is a mask under a mask, looking like the Jester's actual face was ripped off, and there's another mask underneath, framed with meaty flesh and real hair around the edges. I like the simpler white mask from the first one, as this one feels bulky, and the Jester's top hat barely fits his noggin with this new mask. Now, I'm not knocking the Terrifier series. It really is a phenomenon worth celebrating, but if I'm being honest, the lack of story always soured the series for me. I know gorehounds love it, but I'm not really into gore for gore's sake, and that's what the Terrifier series is to me a lot of the time. The Jester does something worth applauding, though. Sure, the first one was a lot like the Terrifier clones out there, but by adding story, characters, stakes, and a little depth to the sequel, the Jester 2 feels like a much more accomplished film than the much more popular Terrifier sequels ever have. I doubt it will reach the phenom level that Damien Leone's creation has, but the filmmaker behind The Jester 2 have made a solid horror gem that entertained me from spooky start to big bloody finish. Well, there's a bunch of new indie horror flicks that you might have not known existed. Let me know which ones interest you and which ones don't down in the comments. Please do me a favor and punch that like button down below. Share this video with all of your social media addicted pals. Click subscribe to this channel and ring that bell for notifications.
You're doomed to live the life you're meant to be, stuck inside your reality. You're doomed. Oh, you're doomed. You're